Hey, I'm Kaz Bracey for Tuts Plus. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use Avocode 3 to generate CSS variables from a design that you've imported into the software. Avocode can actually export preprocessor variables, but to keep things relatively straightforward, we're just going to use its functionality that generates normal CSS property-based variables. We're going to create variables for the design's color, a little on its typography, and a couple of layout variables. So as for where you should create variables, you don't want to have a variable for every single property in your site. That's unnecessary and it can become inefficient. Where you should consider using a variable is any place that you think you might want to easily update something. So color is a perfect fit for that case. If you use variables to control your color scheme, then you can create multiple different color schemes with the same design using relatively little extra effort. The other reason is if you have a value that's going to be repeated in your code a number of times, then it can be more efficient to use a variable. An example for that might be a common padding width that you're using throughout your site. So let's begin with the colors first. Now, if you followed along with the course Code Friendly Design with Adobe XD, where we put together this design, we created a whole bunch of swatches to make it super easy to generate the color scheme, and we also named each of those swatches according to where the color is used, and we also set up these names so that they could be easily borrowed from to create variable names. Let me just drag this out so we can see the whole lot here. So we want to create a variable out of the background color of this swatch, which is this color code here. What we're going to do is just select this color code. Now, anything that you select and highlight in this window here is going to automatically get copied into your cache. So all I have to do now is release, and you can see it says code copied. Now I'm going to create a new variable by hitting this plus button down here, and in the replaced text field, I add in that hex code that I just copied. So now anywhere throughout the entire site that this hex code is found, it's going to be replaced by the variable name that we specify. So we're just going to borrow from this layer name, and we're going to call our variable site underscore bg underscore color. And we're including the word color in this variable so that when all these variables are carried across into code, there's something descriptive in there to differentiate one type of variable from another. So we'll create that. Now watch this line here. As we create the variable, you'll see this code get replaced by the variable name. So we'll hit create variable, and there you go. Now you can see that the variable is used in here, and it's actually also going to show up now anywhere else that this color is used. We're not actually using this color anywhere else, so I'll show you this on one of the subsequent swatches that we create. So now let's do the same thing again. We'll select our next swatch, we'll highlight our code, which automatically copies it, hit the plus button, paste in our hex code, set the variable name based on the layer name, site underscore wrapper underscore bg underscore color. Now we'll create that variable. It's been swapped into our code here. That color has been used in other places in our site. So for example, this box here, now we can see that that has automatically had the variable placed in here because it's using that same color code. We'll just have a quick look at another spot. Once again, using that same blue, so there's that same color code. That's really, really handy, and it's a great way to start getting variables all throughout your code without having to do it all manually. So now we're just going to keep going through the same process for each of these swatches. So I'm just going to speed through this because we're not covering anything different each time. It's just the same process. On this next swatch, the name that we have here is a little bit too long to have it in its entirety. So what we're going to do is use a sort of a shorthand. We know that this color is stop 1 in a linear gradient on panel 2. So what we're going to do when we create this variable is we'll call it P2 for panel 2 underscore LG for linear gradient underscore S1 for stop 1. So then we'll do the same thing on this next one. We'll call it P6 for panel 6 underscore RG for radial gradient underscore S1 for stop 1. And then we'll just do the same thing for the others. So P6 RG S2, P6 RG S3. Alright, so that's all our colors. Next up, we're going to get the font families that are being used and save those as variables as well. So we're only using two font families. We're using Amatic SC and Railway. So we're just going to select this title here, which has Amatic SC. And we're just going to do the same things we did with our colors. Just highlight the portion of text that we want to have replaced with the variable. That copies it. Hit the plus button. Paste in the copied text. And this we're going to call title underscore font underscore family, so that that's descriptive like we talked about. And we'll do the same thing for the railway font. Copy the text. Make a variable. And this one we're going to call main, because it's just our main font family that we're using. Font family. Now we only have a couple more variables to make, and these are going to be variables to control layout. We have a consistent amount of spacing throughout our design. And before, we turned off these measures that we had, but these are in there to indicate the size of the spacing at various points in the design. So we know we've got an 80 pixel spacing amount that's used here. And we know that further down, we have 120 pixel spacing amount. In our typography, we also have a 40 pixel amount. And then all the way up the top here, we have a 20 pixel amount of spacing along here. We can actually check on that using the ruler or measurer. If we check this box here and then hover over this gap, we can see that that's 20 pixels. So we've got 20 pixels, 40 pixels, 80 pixels, and 120 pixels. We're actually going to convert all of those into rem values. So let's start with our 80 pixel value. Now the system is actually going to automatically convert these pixel dimensions to rems for us, as we can see here. So we've got 80 pixels, it's 5 rem, and we're going to copy that, make a new variable, paste in our 5 rem value, and we're going to call it spacing underscore large. And we're going to scroll down all the way down here. Do the same thing again. So we've got our 120 pixel value is 7.5 rem. I'm going to save that out as spacing extra large. Now we also want to get a value in to represent our spacing of 40 pixels. We know that that's half the amount of this value that we just defined as spacing large. So that means we need to save it out as 2.5 rem. So let's just make a new variable. This time we'll just type it in manually, 2.5 rem. We'll give that variable the name spacing medium. Now we need another one that is half that amount again, half of the spacing medium amount, and that is for the top spacing that we have up here. So half of 2.5 is 1.25 rem, and we'll give the variable name spacing small. So now wherever you want to set up this amount of spacing, all you need to do is use the spacing large variable. If you want to have this little small amount of spacing, then you'll use the spacing small variable. And one of the reasons that we use variables for the spacing is that the value of variables can be changed in media queries. So as we shrink down this design to suit a smaller viewport, we don't want as wide gaps around it. We want to try to crunch things down and take more advantage of that limited amount of space. So what we can do in the media query is redefine the value of these 4 spacing variables that we just set up. So by just changing those 4 variables, we can completely shrink down the entire layout of the site. And there's one other thing that we want to also control in our media queries the same way, and that is the width of this arrow graphic here, which is going to be exported as a scalable vector graphic. We don't want this arrow to stay the same size even as the screen shrinks down. We want to keep it at a nice proportional width. So we're going to save out the width of this image as a variable as well. So just like we did before, highlight this text, create a new variable, paste it in, and we're going to call this one arrow width. So with that width defined as a variable, we're going to be able to use media queries to shrink the size of this arrow down as there's less and less space in smaller viewports. So now we've got all the variables that we need. They're all here. Now we can export them all and transplant them into our CSS ready for use in our code. To do that, you can see this little button here that says export. So go ahead and hit that button, then go over to the export tab, and then you can see that it's nicely packaged up all of our variables so that we can easily copy and paste them into our file. So we're just going to copy to clipboard, jump into a style sheet that is empty and ready for the variables to be added. Now we're going to need to add the root element for these variables to go into. So that's colon root, and then we can paste everything in. At the moment, it's a bit of a mishmash. These variables aren't in order in any way at all. And it's going to help us navigate our way around our own code if these things are categorized. So we're going to put all the color variables up at the top, and we're going to put them in the same order that they are in our list of swatches here. We've got site BG color, site wrapper color, highlight color. Actually, that should be named highlight color 1, highlight color 2, and then we've got our gradient variables. So the one for panel 2, so that's P2 LGS1, and then the 3 for our panel 6 gradient. So P6 RGS1 for the stop 1, and then the one that ends in S2, and then the one that ends in S3. Oh, it looks like I missed one. Lattice color, which should be listed before the highlight colors. Now let's get our font families in the right order. The title and main font family. And then we'll just rearrange our spacing variables so that they increase in size as we go along. And then we'll put our arrow width variable on its own because it's a little different. And then that is now all of our variables. Now let's preview what we've got so far, which is not much, but let's just check and make sure that these variables are being accessed by the browser. So I am going to use the plugin Live Server for VS Code. If you're using Atom, then I recommend the plugin Atom Live Server instead. So to get a live preview going, all I need to do is right click on my index file and choose Open with Live Server, and it'll spin up a localhost server and give you a preview in your default browser. From here, we can open up the inspector tools, and we can see right away that on the root element, all of our variables are accessible. So that is how you use Avocode 3 to define a whole bunch of variables, export them, and then put them into your code ready for use. It's much, much quicker than doing everything by hand, so it's a very, very useful feature. Thanks very much for watching this tutorial, and I will see you in the next one.